the larger theme that I've kind of been hooked into over the last few months, from late spring and through the summertime, is that of an upward trend, or at least potential for the Opportunity Zone initiative moving forward, as we're kind of coming out of COVID, or at least coming out of a lot of the lockdowns and restrictions in most parts of the country. We've actually had a few gatherings recently, right? I mean, we had the OZ Expo. I was at the ADISA conference back in May. People are getting together again. And what that potentially means for Opportunity Zone capital raising and capital investment going forward. On the last, on some of the recent podcast episodes I've done, I've kind of recapped from a 30,000-foot view the history of the program, right? The legislation was passed at the end of 2017. The zones were designated in July of 2018. It took, from that point, it took an additional year and a half before we got final regs. We didn't have final regs until the end of 2019. So now finally, it looks like coming into 2020, we were going to hit the ground running full speed ahead with, most questions completely answered regarding Opportunity Zones. And then the pandemic kind of screwed up all of the markets and did a number to a lot of people who were raising capital in the Opportunity Zone space, particularly for our friends in the hospitality sector. I know a few funds got hammered pretty hard if they had a heavy hotel component in their portfolio. I think now we're finally starting to come out of that, where people are having a little bit more comfort with Opportunity Zones. The main challenge now is, what's going to happen with tax policy going forward, right? So I had a panel at my most recent OZ Pitch Day event a couple of weeks ago focused on that very topic. What tax policy changes are likely to be heading down the pipeline? In what fashion will the tax policy changes be enacted, whether legislative or regulatory, and the impact that they can have on Opportunity Zones? Overall, the panelists and I think we were in agreement that Opportunity Zones are in good shape. From a political standpoint, it seems like there's no real intent from the administration or from either side of the aisle in Congress to do anything too drastic to Opportunity Zones. It doesn't seem like anybody in power wants to get rid of them. Certainly, there's an opportunity for the Biden administration and his team and this current session of Congress to put their own stamp on the Opportunity Zone legislation, possibly put some guardrails around it. Everybody's in favor of, or it seems like everybody's in favor, fund managers in particular are in favor of additional reporting requirements. It's just a matter of time, I think, until we get to that point. There is some legislation floating around in Congress that is potentially going to extend the program or put some sort of reporting requirements around the program. But, I don't think it's certainly not going to be to the detriment of the program. And in fact, it might long-term help the program significantly if any of this legislation gets passed. The question is just a matter of, when can that get passed? I haven't ever gotten a good answer from anybody on that. I think it's just very hard to predict where that might be going. In terms of capital raising, I wanted to draw attention to a report that was released in May from the Joint Committee on Taxation. There's been lots of questions about, well, how much capital is this program actually raising? What type of scale are we looking at here? And to put it into perspective, the most similar program to Opportunity Zones is possibly the New Markets Tax Credit Program. That program is capped at about $3.5 billion annually. So let's get back to this Joint Committee on Taxation report, which was issued in May. They found, according to tax return data, that qualified opportunity funds through only the end of 2019 So speaks nothing of 2020 because that return data isn't available yet. They found that qualified opportunity funds have made roughly $24 billion in total investments as of the end of 2019. So that's significantly, that's a significant multiple of the amount that's put into the new markets tax credit program, 3.5 billion, which is all just to say this program, this OZ program is raising a significant amount of capital, and the capital is being deployed into these opportunity zones at a pretty good clip so far, at least from that early data. And then the final thing I'll say before I shut up and turn it back over to Chris, maybe we've got some questions or we can go down some other routes here, is what I see on the horizon for the rest of the year. I see OZs having a lot of tailwinds in terms of investor activity potentially. Kind of coming back to my point that I started with, one, regs are finalized now. There's really no excuse not to do an OZ deal if you have any, legal or accounting questions. I mean, I think the 99.9% of all those questions have been answered at this point by the IRS. You've got good guidance on almost anything you would possibly do. Two, COVID seems to, or the disruption from COVID seems to be dissipating. Some people may question that if you look at what's happening in some parts of the country right now, but I think overall we're in much better shape than we were a year ago, at least. I think it'd be hard to argue that point. Three, we've got some other tailwinds, which are, one, we're kind of heading in toward the end of the year when a lot of investment activity picks up just for year end and tax planning purposes. And additionally, as you may know, in December of this year, December 31 of this year, the 10% basis step up benefit expires. So I think that's going to draw a lot of urgency to the program in the last few months of the year. So I think we can really see some quite a bit of activity pick up from in terms of investment dollars flowing in.